Welcome back to the So There I Was podcast. I'm your host again, Travis Womack. Today's special guest is Kevin Dow Crowsyn. He's a career AGR reservist and also a military influencer. Social media is his specialty. So we're going to definitely hear a lot of cool things. Has recently just got back from Vegas a few weeks ago at the Military Influencer Conference, which if you remember last year, I was there interviewing Adam Bratz. So kind of a cool thing. We're here a year later doing it again, and is currently working for U.S. Army recruiting out of Tampa. So Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Travis, thanks for having me on. Definitely appreciate the opportunity to have some fun and talk about Army stuff.
Absolutely. So let's start with what you just did. I think that's a great thing that's going on there at the MIC and kind of just people sharing their knowledge. So what was the biggest takeaway you got from that?
Just the breadth and the strength and the knowledge that's within the military community. Military Influencer Conference has really established itself as kind of the premier place to be every year. I got a pretty cool full circle moment I'll share with you on it. So the
Absolutely.
founder is a gentleman by the name of Cortez Riggs. He's a former U.S. Army Recruiting Command First Sergeant.
Okay.
So he's, we've been down that road as well. So when I was in grad school, about I want to say maybe 2015 time frame, I actually interviewed first sergeant an assignment that I had when I was going through University of Florida,
Oh wow.
and it was about freelancing and learn different things you can do on social media. And I was at E7 at the time, so it was cool learning from a first sergeant that had a good rep. Well, he went on to become the founder of Military Influencer Conference.
Oh
So
wow.
this year was a weird little full circle moment. It's
Not
just kind
bad.
of like all these years ago, I was interviewing this guy as a grad school student, and now here we are in 2023, and I'm a marketing professor speaking at the conference that he founded. So it was
That's
really
awesome.
unique experience for me having that kind of full circle
Absolutely.
moment.
That's a what are the odds? Honestly, is what the best way to go with that. So, so
Yeah.
your big thing I know you kind of talk about is this kind of the influence and the use of social media. So kind of what do you got to share on that? Because I think it's we were joking on the phone the other day how Facebook is it's not dead, but it's not the same as it was in 2012. And like for professionals, LinkedIn's a much better platform. And obviously, if you want kids to be involved in recruiting stuff, it's TikTok. So, what are your takeaways from
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah, so my background is I really first started getting interest in social media when I joined Army recruiting in 2009. And just really like anyone else wanting to adapt to the new thing, got into Facebook and really started self-developing, started kind of developing some strategic coursework. I got into the analytics side that really interested me, and that was successful. So that led me to pursue a grad school with University of Florida, because they had just at that time in about 2014-15 timeframe kicked off a brand new master's program in their mass communication with a specialty in social media. So they
Oh,
were one of
wow.
the first top-ranked university to really be diving into the first round, so to speak, of higher education focusing on social media from an academic standpoint.
That's awesome.
So I put all my eggs in that basket, got some referrals. I actually didn't meet the qualifications to get into the University of Florida. My undergrad I did when I was on active duty, and it was with American Military University, a little lackluster
Hmm.
GPA. But because of what I was doing with social media and recruiting and really creating some innovative things out on the West Coast, I got some good letters of recommendations and I got in. Uh, and I wish it was happily ever after, but nothing's ever that easy.
No, never.
I My first semester, I got a C in one of my classes because I just was trying to focus on recruiting and nobody's fault but my own. But I actually got kicked out
Oh,
my first
wow.
semester of the University of Florida because C's are a no-no once you get to grad school. And so not only was I not qualified to get into University of Florida, but I boloed it my first semester in. So took a short break, got my stuff together, PCS, and then once I PCS, became a station commander in recruiting. Then I reapplied, and that was my smooth sailing. I did 2 years start to finish, knocked it out.
Nice.
Um, and that was really the impetus to everything else. I was able to help start a USEREC's first brigade-wide social media strategic platform or strategy.
Yeah.
Basically, it was called the Digital Recruiter Program and Sixth Recruiting Brigade, which covered the whole West Coast, Alaska, the Pacific Rim. It was, the first time that USEREC had created a full-time position dedicated to social media.
Oh,
So
wow.
we were kind of a pilot. We were the first to set that up. Went on to create several other regional programs. I helped write a few regulations, helped write USEREC's first doctrine for medical recruiting. And then earlier this year, we wrote the first really comprehensive doctrine for social media strategy. And then in between that, I was a station commander for medical recruiting. I was first sergeant for Orlando medical recruiting. While I arrived in April of 2020 to be the first sergeant of a recruiting company, if you recall what was going on in the world in April of
Bad time.
2020, um, it just so happened that I have a specific background and skill set in virtual marketing and social media. So it actually worked out well. I inherited the company being in first place, which a lot of people say that's the worst place to be.
It's hard to
You
say though.
know, most people want a company that is, not doing so well, so you can fix it up and be the hero. So not only did I come in, right smack at the beginning of a global pandemic, but I came into the company that was sitting in first place for the first time ever. But thanks to an awesome team and an extreme pivot towards social media and doing business a different way, we actually stayed in first place in 2020 and 2021, becoming the
Nice.
first company in medical recruiting history to be number one for 3 years in a row.
Wow.
So we definitely set records. Obviously it wasn't all due to social media, but it definitely helped. Again, helped write the new doctrine for medical recruiting and really helped do a lot of virtual strategy training with
That's awesome.
leaders across the country. So it's been my wheelhouse. The last year or two, I've really been expanding outside of the Army bubble. I've been doing guest speaker gigs with industry conferences with University of Florida. As you mentioned, the
Yeah.
Military Influencer Conference. I did a session called Ping Pong versus Chess, kind of addressing different leadership styles and how they pertain to social media, and the focus on how leaders really need to focus on the strategic side of social media. A lot of people really, in this day and age, focus on tactical execution, especially USEREC. We want short term, we want immediate payoff.
Yeah.
Um, but
Send
as with
7,000
anything,
messages, get one appointment.
yeah, but as with anything in building a business, I mean, as you know, you're as an entrepreneur,
Oh, yeah.
you can't just dive in and hip pocket everything. There's got to be framework. There's
Oh,
got to
yeah.
be, strategic analysis done. There's got to be goal setting, and the same applies to social media and digital marketing. So that's really the message that I take. I don't claim to be the most effective content creator. I don't claim to be a super influencer, but where my skill set is thinking about it differently, changing
Oh,
the
yeah.
mindset and coming at social media and digital marketing from the strategic point of view. And then that led me, my most recent thing, which I absolutely love, is I'm a professor now with graduate programs with West Virginia University.
Oh, cool.
They actually have a program, they partnered with Dinfos. So anyone who's current or former military public affairs gets a huge tuition discount, and they pipeline them through this their graduate program for marketing communications. So all of my students are current and former DINFOS members.
Oh, cool.
So it's really cool having a military
Common language for
tie-ins.
sure.
Yeah, and I've having done my graduate school online with the University of Florida, I can definitely relate and understand, the intricacies of the military community. And I had a student my last term that was in emergency management and also a reservist.
Yeah.
And hey, stuff happens, stuff comes
Yeah.
up, and I
Hurricanes
think
suck.
yeah. So it's one of those you really being able to empathize and work with military students through a grad program and talking about something I'm passionate
Yeah.
about and I love is really it's awesome. This is probably my favorite gig so far actually
That's
is
awesome.
teaching.
I think people didn't realize that that kind of stuff's out there. I want to go back to something you said though, the that great line of ping pong versus chess. Are
Hmm.
you making reference to, I think this is my assumption, I'll let you definitely
Sure.
respond, is you have people out there that just post and post and post and post and post and post. It's like is that the version of ping pong
Hmm.
versus chess where it's strategic tagging, strategic, you know, um, like LinkedIn's a great example where if you put a link to a outside website in your primary post, the algorithm will actually push it down because
Hmm.
they don't want you to leave LinkedIn.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
it's better to put a post and then put the link in
Yeah.
the comments, and then it's better to tag people within
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and it keeps the circle going.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize stuff like that. Is that what you're referring to a little bit?
That's part of it. I try to actually start at the top level because again, I want to appear to the shot callers. I want to appear to
Yeah.
business leaders, to even top level commanders, from the military point of view, to really think about what are your strengths as leaders. So some people, when we think of first sergeants or COOs in the civilian standpoint, they're what we think of as ping pong players. They're very adaptable. They're quick on their feet.
Hmm.
They can react to any situation and they can execute, right? And then you have your CEOs and your commanders, who we think more of chess players, who, they have to see the forest through the trees. They have to envision where we're going to be 12 to 18 months from now. 12 to 24 months from now,
Hmm.
right? So both of those are great leadership skill sets. Most people tend to lean more towards one or the other. Personally, I'm leaning for rating myself, I'm more of a chess player.
Yeah.
I like the strategic analysis. I like to I can envision where we're going to be, a year from now. That's more in my skill set. And that's not to say they're all inclusive. Obviously,
Yeah.
there's overlap and, but people tend to lean more towards one or the other
Yeah.
in their leadership styles. Now, those leadership styles, people have to understand, tie directly into how we operate on social media. Because you might have a great ping pong player, which is someone who, like you said, they can post, they can come up with great content, they can they know all the great tactics to use. They can respond to breaking news, they can hop on all the latest trends and hashtags.
Right.
But if that ping pong player isn't teamed up or being led by a chess player who has laid the groundwork and framework and set the goals
Right.
and really kind of developed the strategy, that ties in. Why are we even on social media? Why are we on this
Right.
platform? Content strategy, platform strategies. How does your social media presence apply to your organizational mission, vision, and goals? Right. So it all ties together. And I've really dove in and I speak a lot about that analogy of ping pong versus chess because it
Yeah.
doesn't just apply to social media, it applies to us as
Oh yeah.
leaders.
Everything.
And I'm sure you can relate. How would you rate yourself? Would you consider yourself more of
Uh,
a ping pong guy or a chess
yeah. Oh,
guy?
yeah. I'm way more of a chess person. I get commented all the time about my brain lives about 8 months ahead of right now pretty much all the time. It's
Yeah.
funny you say that because we in one of my previous jobs, they wanted to get all these social media platforms, and I remember arguing against it. And it wasn't because I'm against social media by any means. I was like, we represented the Army. I'm like, the Army has these platforms already.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh yeah, they've got 12 million followers on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now, and LinkedIn this and Facebook that and all these things. I'm like, but are those the 12 million people that we want to hear our message? I mean, half of them are bots probably. So get filter through that. I was like, and if you have some retiree from 1956 on there who's sitting in his lounge chair and we're announcing something the Army's doing, but it's for Joe, it's for that E4 or that
Mm-hmm.
O2,
Oh,
to
yeah.
hear. It's like it's not there. Like, oh, we can build followers. I'm like, we also have access to every single soldier's email address directly.
Yeah.
We can just email them directly and be
Oh,
real
yeah.
quick. So it's just kind of I remember having these discussions about like it's taken the chief of staff of the Army years for that account to build up to the
Mm-hmm.
where it's at. It's not a deal where you can just launch an account, put out a really cool milper, and wow, we've got 7,000 followers. We're killing it.
Oh, yeah.
It takes forever. I mean, the amount of followers on this podcast is it's taken a long time, a year to get to where I'm at, and I'm not
Oh,
anywhere.
absolutely.
And I think it's just the understanding, like about strategy. Like, I can't just post 100 podcasts and not got 7,000 followers. It's like that's not how it
Yeah.
works. It's a strategic plan. So it's
Oh,
I think
yeah.
people don't get that. Excuse me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then I think you hit on it. When I was a E7 station commander, I remember getting targeted Facebook ads from like USREC.
Yeah,
And I'm like, I'm in the Army helping you. Like, I am not at
we're on
all
the
part
same
of the,
team.
like, I'm not like y'all are wasting your money. I'm not part of the target
Yeah,
market here, man. Like this is and it doesn't matter. I think more companies are realizing like there's a term that gets thrown around, controversial or not, but called vanity metrics.
hmm
Some people disagree, some people agree with it, but the concept of vanity metrics is, it has to matter. Like if you have like you said, if you have 1 million followers, but none of them are in your target market,
right.
or none of them are converting, then what's it matter?
Yeah,
Like you pick any major corporation like Coke, for example. Coke has, millions and millions, tens of millions of followers on Facebook, but if you look at their average engagement per post, it's like 12.
nothing. Right.
Like,
No, it's not.
so
But look at Oreo, and Oreo has a complete opposite. Or
yeah.
they post, and it's like 7,000 comments, and they're all hilarious.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
So it's just a matter of, does it matter if you have a lot of followers? The
yeah,
answer is maybe. It depends on what your strategy is. It depends on what metrics
yeah,
are important to you. Are those helping you achieve your organizational goals? Because a lot
yeah,
of people like to pump metrics. That's how influencer marketing, a lot of the influencers out there, they either inflate or exaggerate, or they just pump all these high numbers. Oh, look, I have a reach of 2 million, or I got 10 million followers, like, and that just for the uninitiated, it's very dazzling. Ooh,
yeah,
big numbers, that
yeah.
briefs super well.
1% of the
And
population.
yeah, but it doesn't, does that actually help them or any
Yeah,
organization they partner with achieve their goals?
right.
That's the question that needs to be answered.
Yeah, it's understand that there's followers versus impressions versus interactions versus
Oh, yeah.
comments,
There's
and
so many
it's
metrics out
all
there.
that
So
stuff. And
each organization has to understand what is important to them.
yeah,
And that's why, yeah, and again, that just goes back to strategy. Most organizations, you'd be shocked, especially, I mean, even in the organization that I work in, we don't even have something as basic as goal setting.
right.
Like walk into, to organization within USREC or elsewhere. USREC's come a long way. I'm
Oh yeah,
not by any
absolutely,
means big
absolutely
on it.
has. Yeah,
We've come leaps and bounds. Um, but even up to a couple years ago, we'd say, hey, what are your goals for social media? Where do you want to be in a year? And that's in the civilian world too. And
oh
a
yeah,
lot of people can't answer that question.
yeah,
It's just, oh, well, we're on social media because we have to. We're posting because we're supposed to post. Like
right.
that's not a strategic way of
If
thinking at
nobody's
all.
interacting, I remember that was my biggest thing with where I was at before was if we're posting on behalf of the Army in a sense,
Mhm.
and like, hey, we're doing the Army's now doing this.
Mhm.
Like a great example years ago was all captains going to the captain's career course had to take the what's the master's school test? My brain just stopped. Um, Holy cow! You have to take that test. I didn't have to do it for mine.
Yeah.
The G no whatever that test is. Oh my gosh, my brain just. Anyways, that test you're required to
Yeah.
take that test at the captain's career course, and like the uproar was like, "Dude, I've already got a master's degree. This is ridiculous. Why do I take?" And all these things.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
but and no matter what you do, you're going to get that. There's always a portion of the audience that this is stupid, right? And I
Yeah.
get that. And it's like, well, if we post, hey, they all have to do this,
Mhm.
then people are going to interact and put a comment like, why do we have to do this? Like,
Yeah.
if we don't respond to that, then we're going to die in the abyss of whatever social media platform it is. Cause like, if people think they have social media, it's a form of communication. And like, I know for me, like I don't call customer service on anymore. I go to social
Mhm.
media and find them on their messenger or whatever it is. And like, it's direct that way,
Oh yeah.
and it's just a lot better. And if they don't respond, it's like, why are you here? So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
I bought a pair
And
of shoes that way. I took a picture of them, took a picture of the screenshot of
oh
the
yeah.
receipt, and like they shouldn't tear in 3 months. And the owner of the
Yeah.
company, who it's Freedom Industries, I'll give him a plug
Mhm.
here. He's like, dude, no, absolutely not. You got a new one. Here's your tracking number on the way. New pair of shoes
Yeah.
on the way. I'm like, that's the way it should be.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
communication, not the new shoes part, but the communication part.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
so
and that's been part of something that has been really cool for me to tie in. You mentioned at the beginning that I'm a pure reservist. I'm
yeah,
actually a rarity in the AGR program. I've been reserve component my whole career, so
yeah,
8 years reserve, and then the rest of my time AGR, still working reserve component with recruiting command. But within recruiting command. The reserve side is sometimes misunderstood. There's some stigma and reputation.
yeah,
For many years, there was very limited career progression for AGR and reserve soldiers, especially when in organizations where we work hand in hand with active duty. Um, so the stigma, is real. And it's better.
yeah.
So like we have 15 first sergeant positions, so
Oh
for
wow.
me, being a first sergeant was a pipe dream, so the fact that I got to wear a diamond in my industry was, to me, that was the pinnacle. That
Yeah,
was if I get to do nothing else, I got to wear a diamond, and then that's a
yeah,
lot bigger of a deal for a reserve guy,
yeah,
because the tip of the pyramid is a lot steeper.
yeah,
Just by pure logistics, there's not a lot of us. So for me to have not only been a first sergeant, but established a name for myself and to become a marketing expert within the Army and outside of the Army, um, I think it's really cool for me kind of representing the reserve side,
yeah,
because I think the reserve side doesn't always get a lot of credit, and they're kind of, even within active organizations, we're kind of not always on the same, playing field, so to speak. So taking pride in being an AGR guy, a
yeah.
reserve guy that has been able to accomplish all these things, and to really show the others that, because it's easy to get jaded in any MOS or in any career field where, there's a steep pyramid or a steep glass ceiling past a certain pay grade. It
Oh
can
yeah,
be hard, and people get demotivated or disillusioned, and that happens across the board. But to try and be an example for those others coming up, to say, hey, look, you can find a niche for yourself, you can make it to the top, and I'm not saying my way is the way, but being able to show that the path that I charted to where I've gotten, and represent the reserve component, and reserve soldiers that are coming up in recruiting, has been really cool, and that's
that's
a
awesome.
rewarding part of what I've been able to do now as well.
Yeah, there's definitely the jokes and sarcasm that we all do across all the branches. People don't realize that all the branches have a reserve, but the Army
Mhm.
Reserve is the most well known, I would argue. But
Yeah.
it's part of that is fun, and
Hmm.
so because we it's fun that we do it to ourselves on our active side
Yeah.
as well,
Sibling rivalry.
right. But you only do it 1 week in a month. It's like, well, I get that part of on the actual reserve side of things, but it's like, you know, people don't understand the grand schemes. I remember when I went to I was a logistics office, big word for me. Um, so I remember when I went to the career course for that, and we learned about like the levels of logistics, and like the active duty stops really quick.
Hmm.
Like what our scope of responsibility is in the grand scheme of global logistics.
Hmm.
And which is predominantly what the reserves are, falls under logistics branch. And I remember thinking like,
Yeah.
we have the trucks to haul fuel real quick, or a wrecker here, and a water truck over there. It's like, but like as soon as you leave your immediate like city, like everything's reserves,
Hmm.
and like all the massive convoys were reservists, and all the getting the casualty evacuation process is all reserves, all the mortuary affairs. There's only one active duty mortuary affairs, I think in the entire army, it's
Hmm.
like 10 people. So
Yeah.
the rest of it's all reserves. I think there's just it's called the reserves for a reason,
Yeah.
because like we don't need to be paying, you know, 20,000 people to haul fuel every single day, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was I know you spent a little time overseas in Kuwait and stuff, but like even in Baghdad at Biop, at the Biop Liberty, whatever the name of the day was, they had this massive defect, and I think everybody there that worked there was Polish.
Hmm.
And I remember people were complaining like, "Oh, we have soldiers to do this." I'm like, we don't have that many. Like
Yeah.
this defect feeds like 20,000 people, like all at all times, 24 hours,
Yeah.
and just going, 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 going. Like the army could recruit, and you're not both. I spent time in used to write too. That's a lot of people to try to recruit to be a cook,
Yeah.
and then you have that many families, so you have TRICARE for all these people, and
Hmm.
you have all these kids that come in. So 50% of the military is married and has other dependents. So it's like
Yeah.
now we're compounding things, and then you compound the VA responsibility in the back end and everything else. It's
Yeah.
like it's a $1 billion investment over time,
Yeah.
versus paying a bunch of Polish guys, $20 million. So call.
Absolutely.
So I think
Yeah.
the misunderstanding, miseducation of it, I
Oh
think
yeah.
it definitely
And then
feeds into that.
Oh yeah, and then I've love your story. I've listened to your other podcast, and the story of why this podcast exists.
Yeah.
And reservists have a very kind of unique perspective about military service, and there's a lot of imposter syndrome
Oh yeah.
going on in the reserve component. Part of it is I would say we don't do ourselves any favors with some of the with some of the sibling rivalry and smack talk.
Yeah.
We know it's all in fun, but sometimes it does have real um, mental consequences for some people.
Yeah.
So I deployed. I say deployed, but everyone says those aren't deployments. I served overseas in Kosovo in 2003, just as Iraq was like literally as Iraq was kicking off. We were going to Kosovo, and it was a NATO peacekeeping mission. Worked in a hospital, and when I got back and I was like 18 years old, got to cut the army birthday cake on post and everything. It was like first thing I'm doing out of high
Wow.
school is going to Kuwait. But again, the stigma, the stereotype, whatever you want to call it, I get back. Most civilian people aren't the wiser. They just know Iraq kicked off and I've been gone for a year. So I
Right.
come back and everyone's like, "Oh, yay, like, like thank you for your service." And I'm
Yeah.
like, I worked in the talk of a hospital in Kosovo.
Right.
Like it was a cool experience. It was definitely, super unique, and it was up my alley. I'm an HR guy. I joined as an administrative specialist in the reserve component. As a joke with you, call it the opposite of infantry, right?
Yeah.
If the infantry is the most hardcore and hands-on, then the least of that on the opposite end of the spectrum would be a reserve HR guy. So I always joke that I'm the opposite of
That's funny.
infantry. But again, coming back from Kosovo, the culture at large is like, oh man, what'd you do? Thanks for your service, all this stuff. And I'm like, I did not, a couple 9-line medevacs once in a while, like did reports, like I made coffee for the master sergeants and the majors, like, like, I mean, it wasn't particularly exciting or impressive compared to, what was going on
Right.
elsewhere in the world. So coming back, especially, being 19, 20 at that point, kind of makes you think about things like, am I like, that imposter syndrome of like, does it count? Like, I know we joke about it,
Right.
but it does kind of make you think like, is this something that's on par? And I think comparing, it took me a long time to really stop comparing and be like, you
Mhm.
know what, screw it. I joined the reserve for a reason. I'm really good at what I do. I'm an office guy.
Yeah.
I've evolved from an HR guy into a marketing guy, and that's what I'm good at. If I would have joined the Army as an infantry, it probably would have been a big mistake because it's not necessarily my wheelhouse. I'm a
Yeah.
little clumsy and my brain doesn't think that way. Um, but you said, like I said, I went to Kuwait just as, the not a deployment. I got the combat patch that everyone a lot of people give me crap for. And it's all in fun, but I think there is a very real element.
Oh,
Again,
absolutely.
getting back for my second deployment as a reservist, as a non-combat guy, as someone who didn't go to Iraq or Afghanistan when the bulk of my peers, I mean, I joined the Army a couple months after 9/11. That was like, and most of my peers, I know, a guy I went to high school with ended up being, Ranger and doing all kinds of
Yeah.
cool guy, kicking indoors type stuff. And it's, again, it took a while to get past that, the comparison,
Yeah.
that me versus them, or really downplaying, like I still do, like everyone downplays when they say thank you for your service, but for
Right.
me especially, I was just like, no, like there's people that did way worse stuff than
Yeah.
me. Like I had air conditioning.
Yeah. We had ice cream. I was kidding. Sorry. It's funny you mentioned that 'cause I think that the realism of that though is not talked about near enough of,
Mhm,
there is a lot of, my days in the airborne infantry, we used to always make fun of anybody who wasn't us.
yeah.
It was us and then there was everybody else.
Mhm.
And we took a lot of pride in that. And every unit does that.
Oh, of
I think,
course.
and but it wasn't until honestly when I remember being in Iraq and getting we call them speedballs, but the helicopter would push out a bag of MREs and water. And
Mhm.
the first time they did that, the bag was full of ice with all the water bottles, and we're like, oh, these guys are the best dudes ever. Like they
Mhm.
they understand it's 118 degrees out here in July,
Mhm.
and the idea of getting cold water is crazy. So it was it. I remember distinctly carrying this or dragging this huge bag back to this building we were in,
Mhm.
and like my brain clicking over and being like, I can't make fun of them like that. There was a point
Mhm.
where it was personal. Like we all made fun of it. It's all good and fun, but it's also kind of personal, And
Yeah.
now it's like, okay, it's all good and stay in the good and fun category, you know.
Yeah.
And like an HR guy be like, you can make fun of me all you want, but your leave
Yeah.
form's never going to get filed. So and
Yeah.
like keep it that banter world of just joking,
Oh yeah.
and not be. But like I think there's a lot of people that honestly really struggle with what you're describing of
Oh yeah.
a few episodes back, I had a guy talking about, am I really a veteran?
Mhm.
And I think that was um, a a real challenge for him to like, what am I doing? It's like,
Mhm.
well, I encourage people to understand like one, you raised your hand to do a job, you know, and you said an oath, you did the training, and you do that job. None of us, there's no like website that we can go log on to with our cat card, and which is redundant. I always hate it. Dang it,
Nah.
I did to myself. We don't call it a call card though. Okay, it doesn't work. So,
Nah.
but like, there's nowhere to log on and be like, oh, look, there's an open slot for an HR guy to go to middle of Bagram Air Base. I'll do it. Sign me up. And like, you don't.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. You can't like
Yeah.
volunteer for deployment. You can't volunteer for location. It's like you get there,
Yeah.
you get in your unit, and like something happens. You
Yeah.
know, and I know plenty of infantry guys that somehow missed all the war during the early 2000s. I'm like, how did you miss the war? Like I deployed three
Yeah.
times in 3 years, but
Oh
I'm
yeah.
like, just luck of the draw. So I think there's a big thing to understand. Like you did what you were supposed to do.
Oh
Now,
yeah. Yeah, I had when I was in Kuwait, so this is 04, 05, so this, they're really
right?
pumping up. I worked at air or up the road from Arifjan, but it was the naval port basically, where all the
Yeah.
stuff was coming in and out of theater. So I was in the talk, basically updating Excel, keeping track of everything coming in and out of theater. Um, so like very, office work. I'm a top guy. Like
Yeah.
I'm doing reports and briefing the bosses and talking to all the yards every hour, keeping track of what's going in and out. Again, not sexy, not exciting.
But it's
Uh,
needed. Someone's got to
but
do it.
it's needed. But at that, while I was there, I mean, we ran out of logistics officers in the reserve component. Like that's how, as you were
Yeah.
around, as a, that's how crazy it was. We had majors, being pulled out of the IRR to serve in captain positions,
Yeah.
that are, we had a guy in our unit that was actually retired, got recalled as a major, not even, again, recalled out of their retired reserve to come
Wow.
serve in a captain position just because we were so,
Short.
cycling through people. So the Army was just short staffed on all ends. So they came through where we were at, and they're like, hey, we need volunteers. Who wants to go run gun trucks? Do convoy escorts up and down Iraq. And a lot of my peers jumped at the opportunity. That's something that a lot of us never thought we'd get to do. It's definitely a unique experience, especially for a logistics unit.
Oh
Much
yeah.
less a logistics headquarters. Um, so a lot of people jumped at the opportunity, and I really thought about it. And part of it, and I ended up choosing to not. I was like,
Yeah.
look, I'm good at doing office stuff. I stayed behind. I actually finished my associate's degree while I was in theater in Kuwait.
Oh wow.
So worked my 50, 60 hours a week in the talk and spent the rest of the time, in the MWR tent, doing homework basically, making use of the time. But
Some high quality
um,
internet.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was good enough. I got the job done. But this is something that I actually had dealt with for years internally. Is that a coward move of me? Like, is that not me doing my duty? Should I have volunteered to go run gun trucks? Like, it's, not to like if I was put in that position, like anyone who joins the army that's put in the position is ready and willing to fight. Um, but that's something that was, all the credit in the world to the guys that did it, respect the hell out of them. It just wasn't a decision that I made. And a lot of people might give me crap saying, hey, missed opportunity, or hey, they needed you. And I think that's another part of that talk, part of that internal
Hmm.
side of it, that reservists have to contend with. Some of them are thrust unwillingly
Right.
into those positions. There's a lot of unfortunate circumstances throughout the Iraq and Afghanistan where reservists, especially the transportation and convoy folks,
Hmm.
were thrust into situations that they were wholly unprepared and untrained for. But then you have a situation like this where it was like, hey, do you want to do this? And
Yeah.
like, does that make me a POS for saying no? Like, and that's something that I had to reconcile and be like, no, I made the right decision. I made
Right.
the right decision that was good for me, that was good for the unit. Um, I'm like in an alternate universe, who knows? But um, I think that's something that isn't unique to me. I think it's more unique to the reserve component.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's something that you think about, and that's something that where that sibling rivalry can get real. Like where does Pogue
Animosity.
where does Pogue become coward? Where does like
Yeah, it's
They're
it's it's an interesting thing to bring up though, because I think there's, you know, coming from being a recruiter, years ago for me, I remember like one of my things was like I understood very well that airborne infantry is a unique beast, and
Mhm.
it's not for everybody. And there was plenty of people that I remember in my unit that were like, "How did you get here?" you know, and we all joke, "Oh, I was blame the drill sergeants, and then the drill blame the recruiters," and it's just like this cycle of
Yeah.
of craziness. But well, there's people that I think that don't somehow they hear or they weren't listening, you know,
Mhm.
of like what the job entails, and then there's we there was nothing to hear. There was nothing to even like, oh, I signed up to be a truck driver. And when you sign up to be a truck driver in 2000,
Mhm.
it was okay. We'll drive big trucks and we'll deliver Coke machines. I mean, what are we doing, right? And then 9/11 happened, and it's like, no, we got to move, enough fuel and water for 185,000 people in theater, on the surge. Let's say it's like, well, we got the Highway 1 cutting through Iraq is a long, long, long road, and it's just an IED trap. And I think it's definitely, to your point, it's thrown through a lot of people into the fight. And they're like, whoa, this was not in my trifold. I was,
Yeah.
it kind of was it in the Army now with Pauly Shore,
Yeah.
and it's like, what was the last war? The World War II. It's like, how about Desert Storm? It's like, oh, I know what that wasn't nothing. And then, a few minutes later, they're trying to haul water across with Green Beret or whatever it was. But
Yeah.
I think there's a moment of reality that hits. It's like, well, you choosing to say, look, I signed up to do this. Yes, the opportunity was there to do that, and I wouldn't judge you at all. I don't, I fully understand that there's um a uniqueness to both. I would never want to be in the talk. Like I hated it when I was not in mission in the talk. I'm like, just somebody punch me in the nose,
Yeah.
please, really, really, really
Yeah.
hard.
I
It was,
was I was in the talk at my the field exercise in basic,
yeah,
both my mobilizations. So I was kind of like an S3 warrior for many years in the
it's
reserve.
needed though, and people who don't understand operations don't understand the complexity of it. That
Hmm.
like you want somebody who wants to be there because it's more
Oh, yeah.
effective,
Yeah.
opposed to someone like me. Like, hey, what am I gonna do? It's like, oh my God. Like I remember I was in the talk, you know, so I was in the old guard years ago, and
Hmm.
I was in the talk during President Trump's inauguration parade and that whole day and swearing in
Hmm.
and stuff. And I was like, this is the most miserable thing. I mean, we had the guys, we all had fun in our own way, but like
Yeah.
in my brain, I was like, this is oh crap. I'm an officer. This is what happens. I'm stuck in talks now. I am the S4. So this is my job is to sit behind a computer screen and watch the fight. Whatever the fight is. This is
Yeah.
a parade, this one, but and I was like, oh my God, I've got to figure out how to be some kind of combat S4 because
Oh yeah.
you know, but
Yeah.
it's no shame on your part. I
Oh
would
no.
just and I think I appreciate you being honest about that because I think there's a lot of people that struggle with that exact mindset of things and I think probably eats them away. And it's really hard because stolen valor stories are one thing, but I think there's I think the government itself struggle with the exact thing you mentioned about that grading,
Hmm.
and I mean, because it took from 9/11 to the first Medal of Honor was years and years and years and years, because
Yeah.
like I think we were grading versus Vietnam in World
Hmm.
War II. It's like, well, that dude got a Medal of Honor for fighting off half of Korea and half of Vietnam, and
Yeah.
killed 85 people and blew up a village and,
Hmm.
got married halfway through and came home. We're like, what the heck? You know?
Yeah.
And over here it's like, he fired a 50 cal, and so it's
Hmm.
just we struggled, I think, in that it's in that same emotion, I think a little bit of things. So no shame on there. But in the spirit of this podcast now, so I'd love to. We got to hear a funny story, and
Oh yeah.
you have to start with so there I was, or it didn't happen. So
Oh yeah. So my funniest surreal moment, and this is for again coming from a pure reservist standpoint, is actually day one in Kuwait. We have our little buses that take us down from the airport to Arif John and everything, and I remember they told us that today the threat level was higher than usual. So normally we don't need to lock and load, but today we do. So immediately a couple of the soldiers on the bus with me get emotional. Which it's
It's happening.
yeah, and it's no, it's we're in Kuwait, chill. It's not that serious, but it gets better. They were not prepared for us to be locking and loading, so they're like, "All right, we don't have enough ammunition. So what we gonna do is, as the phrase goes, is we're gonna pass around this box of ammunition, and we want everyone to grab 1 or 2 bullets and lock and load those." I'm sitting here like, we're a couple of us are looking at each other and we're like, this can't be real. Like
Oh man.
we're the world's premier fighting force, and we're basically preparing a musket line in case something goes down. Not that it would, but that was just like you mentioned, a Pauly Shore movie. It felt like it was right out of just a
Oh.
slapstick movie. I'm like, this is real life. I'm locking and loading in theater, 1 bullet. Like just
What's the it was a movie? Is any of the Gates with Jude Law? It's like one
yeah.
man gets the gun, the next man gets the bullets. If he
Yeah.
dies,
Oh yeah,
wow.
and the fact that, but it was like very serious because
Yeah.
hey, we got to follow protocol, and this is what protocol says. So,
Wow.
and it was, but it obviously, nothing I don't think of note that anyone can recall, like with very few exceptions, has gone down in Kuwait.
That's pretty slim.
Pretty slim. So, but yeah, that's my kind of and it kind of epitomizes my whole, like that's one of the only times where I've like locked and loaded live ammunition, and that
Wow.
situation perfectly encapsulates my career as a reserve, as the opposite of infantry.
That's awesome. I can only imagine the mindset of that. Like, we're gonna do what?
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's funny because like people don't know is like, I mean, Kuwait's like the terminal bypass for everybody to go through.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
if you and so like, I remember I've been there many times and like weapons slung on my back and we never even saw ammunition, when we were
Oh yeah.
there. And what's really funny is I remember I went to Qatar
Oh yeah. I've
and
been there a couple
and
times.
and we all landed in Qatar or Manis Airfield up in
Mhm.
north of Afghanistan. And like we're walking around with 240s slung over our shoulder and stuff, and they're like, you can't carry weapons on this base. And we're like,
Yeah.
we're going to war tomorrow. Like, what are we doing? Like, it was just like this, like,
Yeah.
what the heck? And then
Oh yeah.
I was in Dubai, and like we couldn't, like, our weapons had to be in the arms room at all times.
Oh yeah.
And it was like we had to rent a fleet of like Ford Explorers to go into town, and it's a
Yeah.
different place. So that's
Oh yeah.
hilarious. I can only imagine
Yeah.
like lock and load and like, but you only get 2 bullets.
Yeah.
Use them wisely. Shot
Oh
placement is
yeah.
very important today. So
Yeah. Yeah, when I was
so
in Kosovo, it was it's like you said, slung to my back, goes into the weapon locker at
yeah,
work. Like the only
yeah,
time it was out was literally walking from the barracks to the hospital,
yeah. Back and forth,
So
back and
my
forth.
oh yeah. So literally that was like when, of my entire career, that was literally one of the only the extent of my lock and load in real world
Wow.
experience was
That's a great one though.
was our little shuttle bus musket line.
It's like, do we even need a magazine? Can we just drop it in there and see what happens? That's awesome. So, well, Kevin, man, thanks. This has been a lot of fun. I think there's definitely another itch to scratch here with discussion about reserves and I think the question of am I a vet and
Hmm.
what have I done in those grading things. It's a discussion that can never end. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think that there's I would encourage anybody that's listening, by all means reach out to me. I'm sure you'd be
Hmm.
open to it as well if it's something you're
Yeah.
struggling with,
Oh
and
yeah.
you want a safe place to vent, on the radio or not. But
Oh yeah.
definitely, end of the day is we're all on the same team, and I think
Yeah.
people
You
need to
can't
understand that.
compare, I can never compare what I do to things that you've done. And
Yeah,
everyone just has to come to peace and have the confidence that
yeah,
what you did was enough.
yeah. That's you do what you're
Whatever
told.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And we'll end it on that note. And if you want to reach out to Kevin, he's on LinkedIn under Kevin Dow Crowsyn. It's Crowsyn. Sorry. And I'm sure he'd give you some really good pointers about some social media stuff and love to continue to discuss it. But for everybody else out there, be sure to subscribe and, listen to other episodes. And if you want to be a guest, by all means, go to my website, woolmacc3.com and sign up, and we'll see you on the next show.